Well, I tried not to actually depict a specific thing in nature, but to work in a natural way. Creatures that I think about trying to emulate are bees and wasps, things that accumulate an object in their making. So I try to be like a bee and make little parts and then have it grow into something fully. I often don't have a end point for what the piece will be, but I do have a starting formula. So in this piece, I knew that I wanted the little circles and that I would fill between these two rows of circles with this inner structure. So that's how the piece becomes. Because I think I'm working in a way that is like nature works, I end up making things that feel like nature also. And it's also the intersection between my work and maybe African work or Aboriginal work. You can see those kinds of overlaps, or Chinese printmaking or something like that, because we're all thinking about nature and we're all commenting on nature. And that's the reason for some of those overlaps culturally. Well, for the most part, I try not to lead people towards a specific answer when they're looking at the work through the title. That I want it to be more or less a clean slate for them to experience the piece and find something in it. Now, in the case of this piece, it's called Sea Dragons. It was inspired by seeing some sea dragons at the aquarium in Boston. They have a big tank full of these seahorse-like creatures that float around in there. And for me, these forms derive from the sea dragons' frilly kind of fins and such not. They look a bit like plankton, the sea dragon does. So are these sea dragons? No, they're not sea dragons. Now, this piece also is an ongoing object in that, sort of like Legos, they're my building blocks. And so when I've shown this piece, this is its third iteration, 3 different places. Each time it's very much a different object in that the same pieces are used, but they're responding to the architecture of the space. So in this case, you're going to see it from a distance, you're going to see it over the bookcases, and it deals with the ceiling in a pretty strong way, and the top of the bookcase. And those are the things that the building is bringing to the object this time around. Well, I've been working with cardboard since 1986. I originally began using cardboard because I was in a very limited place in my studio practice. I was living in Brooklyn in a teeny little room, and it was a way that I could continue to still be a sculptor if I had a hot glue gun and a utility knife and those very simple materials and techniques. I've over time really loved the idea that this is valueless and that it's something that we all have a personal physical connection with. We've all taken apart a box or received a box. We know what this stuff is. And its value is like I said, 0. So whatever I bring to it, is what I've done to it, or whatever it becomes is because of what I brought to it. The making process has made it have the value that it has, not because of the thing that it was made of. And in fact, it's more difficult to get it to have value because of this intrinsic valuelessness. And I like the idea that if I can do this to this humble material, then almost anything can be creative or be uplifted by the creative process. Well, here again, I'm thinking about insects and bees in particular, wasps, and seeing through that structure. There's also some allusions to Arabic screens that are made of ceramic and stained glass windows. one of the things that interests me about this structure is that it produces a real strong use of light, and both during the daytime when the light's coming through the window, but also at night when the light's coming out of the window from the illuminated inside to the outside, which is dark, and all of the permutations in between. So the piece, because of the actions of light, has a lot of different ways of being seen and experienced. So they are Mobius, and what a Mobius is, when I think of a Mobius, is that it has no back or front. So I take a strip to begin with that you might think of as a circle, but I've twisted it by 90 degrees, so it doesn't have a front or a back. If you put your finger on it and traced your finger around, you would come back to the same spot on the piece. Well, that's another aspect of it, is that, which is true of most of my work, is that it doesn't have a top or a bottom, and that when I go to hang it for this particular space, I picked the piece up, I looked at it, and I put it up on the wall this way, but it might have been just as easily in any configuration, or front to back for that matter. So they grow slowly out of themselves. When I'm with a piece like this, I'm making it and I'm watching it occur. It's growing out from its center and into the world. Over time, I've learned a little bit about what to expect it to do, but in general, it's always a surprise for me as to where it goes or how it takes on its own selfness. Early on, I started making things that were dioramic in nature, came from natural history museums, and told stories. And those early pieces did use figures quite heavily. And this is a thing that I've only come back to recently in the last few years, to add a figure to the work. They still have that kind of storytelling aspect to it. So in this one, the little guy is trapped in these sticks. There's a kind of lily paddy kind of feeling of the little circles that are around it, and so he has a kind of sense of swimming and being caught in that emotional structure of the piece.